Welcome to this week's Table Talk podcast. I'm Caleb, and I'm joined by David. It is Tuesday, January 28th, and David, it is a little warmer today, a little nice. We hit up the Raising Cane's grand opening this afternoon for lunch, which I think was just a great way to start our day. So
it was grand.
It was grand.
It was grand. We were so full. We sat at the same table as two guys we had never met.
That's right. We were best friends by the end.
We were super close to them.
Knew their families, their bank account information. Yeah. It was great all by the end.
Yep. Mother's maiden name.
Yeah, it was wild. All their security information.
Yep. We
stole their identity.
It was a good lunch.
I got to stop making these jokes.
I know.
We didn't do any of that.
We didn't do any of that.
But we did
sit next to people.
We did sit next to them, yeah.
They were cool.
Yeah, had some good chicken tenders.
Yep. It was a good start to the day, but also Sunday was a good start to the week.
Yeah, it was.
We're diving really deep into this series, Planting the Flag. We're talking about, what is our church? What are we going to say? This is where we're planting the flag. This is where we stand. This is what we truly believe in. Yeah. And we're saying, hey, this is what we think is the fundamentals of what God has put West Towne here for.
Yeah, for sure. We broke into the second half of our mission statement this week, toward wholeness in Jesus. The whole thing being navigating Knoxville toward wholeness in Jesus. And we looked at those last four words this week and really dove into what that means. And that's what we're going to continue to do over these next 4 weeks. We've kind of broken the mission statement down, but we'll kind of continue looking at the four core values of our church for the next 4 weeks, and we'll kind of continue to hit that mission statement as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've talked about this a little bit, where it almost feels like, at least for me, is it as we're talking about it in podcasts, as you're talking about on Sunday morning, it feels like to me that everybody should know this because we've spent so much time on it, but that's not the case. For most people, this is the first time they're hearing any of this, and the first time that they're hearing our explanation or why we think this is important. Yeah. And so when we're talking about those small details, or when we're doing podcast, for me it's like, oh, we've already gone through. It's like, no, this is important for us to really put it out there and explain every detail that we're doing with this. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is one of those things where I think I said it this week. You're probably going to get sick of hearing us talk about this, but that's not a bad thing, because we want everyone to be able to know this phrase, be able to repeat it, and to want to live into it. For us, it's more than just a cliche statement. It's like a frame through which we can view our lives and the decisions we make and the thoughts we think and the words we say. So yeah, it is, but that's already kind of sunk in for us because we've been working with this for over a year now. Yeah. And I hope that says to you guys listening to this that how much we believe in this. That this wasn't something we just like pulled out of a hat 3 weeks ago. It's like this is stuff we've worked on for over a year, prayed through, and we're really excited now to get to share it with you guys as we preach through it and talk about it in kids and student ministry and all these different places. You sort of see it more. It's an exciting time for us because we're getting to share what we've been, talking through and working through for over a year. Yeah. For sure. This past Sunday, you covered towards wholeness in Jesus, and that's the second half of our phrase, navigating Knoxville towards wholeness in Jesus. Wholeness, can you kind of expand on that? I know we've talked a little bit about it last week as we were introducing this week, going into it, but kind of refresh our memories on what does it mean to have wholeness, and why do you think that Jesus wants us to have that? And what does that mean for us?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the idea of wholeness really, to me, traces back to the very beginning. God created us to live as whole human beings, as full human beings. When he created us, God desired and designed us for our relationships with each other, our relationship with him, our relationship with creation, for all that to be whole, to be as it should be. No tension, no strain, no division, no separation, no sin, no death, like things just as they should be. Sin corrupted that wholeness, and what we saw play out in most of the Old Testament was this corrupted, distorted image of that because of sin. I mean, you see it super early. As soon as Genesis 3 happens, you see the wholeness between Adam and Eve break. You see the wholeness in the relationship between God and Adam and Eve break. You get into Cain and Abel. You get into Noah and the flood. You get into all these stories of just these pieces of how things should have been breaking apart. But what is amazing is that as we see and read the story of that breaking apart, we also see God talking a lot about shalom. The Old Testament has this concept, this word, shalom, which we translate often as peace. But really, shalom is the idea of almost putting things back together, putting things back to how they were intended to be, how they were supposed to be. And God, we read through the Old Testament, desires shalom and makes shalom possible, at least glimpses of it, in our still corrupted state. So Jesus' mission then, I believe, is to, at least a major part of it, is to restore us back to that. In the end, I believe when Jesus returns, we will be restored. Creation will be restored and renewed back to how God intended it to be. And that is far beyond our wildest imagination. So as Jesus comes, Jesus prepares the way. Jesus teaches us what a whole, full life looks like. Jesus says that he came so that we may have life to the full. And then Jesus dies and is resurrected so that the things that would keep us from that, sin and death primarily, are dealt with and conquered. And so now in Jesus and through him, both now and when he returns or we die and encounter him in eternity, is making wholeness, making shalom possible again. This is a really long-winded explanation, sorry. But I think we see the fruit of that in our lives when we live out what Jesus said the greatest commandment was. So to love the Lord our God with everything we have and to love our neighbor as ourselves. When we live into that, we are experiencing the wholeness that God desires for us. And I think summed up in that phrase, loving the Lord your God with all we have, loving our neighbor the way we love ourselves. I think if you go back to Genesis to the beginning, those were the three primary relationships that God desired for us to have in fullness, and they were all shattered with God, with others, and with ourselves. And so Jesus, through his work, is making it possible for us to be restored to that wholeness. And there's a lot more we could say about that, and that was a really long explanation.
I was letting you cook,
but,
man.
I probably made it way more confusing. But
let him cook.
So yeah, that's the idea. Really, it is about getting back to the shalom, the wholeness that God desired and intended for his creation the whole time.
Perfect. I love this. I love the word wholeness. I think we love the word shalom.
Yes. Yeah.
We love that. The problem with the word shalom is it doesn't have any context for people outside of our church.
True.
And when you're trying to build something like that, you want to make sure that people can at least get an understanding of what you're saying without having to say, well, let me take you into this word that you've never heard before.
Right.
And so wholeness is a great word to kind of say, hey, this is what we're working towards. So we love the word shalom. We love that idea.
Yeah.
But I think wholeness is a good representation of what that means.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I hope so. And I mean, I think again, it's just you see God desire it. Like God desires for people to experience shalom within themselves. God desires for people to experience shalom between each other. God obviously desires for us to experience shalom with him. But God also desires for creation and communities and cities and churches and households and neighborhoods and schools to experience shalom, which is why, to me, when we talk about this idea of Jesus coming and bringing the kingdom, he says the kingdom is at hand, like that is to me saying, hey, this is possible now. Like we are going to bring this into the world. So it's just a really far-reaching concept that I think applies to everything, which is why I love it, because it truly is holistic in every sense of the word. But it's what a beautiful goal to try to strive toward too.
Yeah, for sure. And I would point out, like, Old Testament people all the time will say, like, well, look at these stories. What do we do with these stories?
Yeah.
And so many of those stories in the Old Testament, the stories that are hard for us to understand or hard for us to get, a lot of times people will go, well, is that what I'm supposed to? And it's like, no, a lot of the Old Testament is showing just the the loss of shalom.
For sure.
Like, or they tell you a story and it feels like that I believe is true, that they actually happened, but it is a sign that people have lost that we've gotten further from Jesus and further from truth, and well, at that point further from God.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And it's just a sign of like, hey, look what's happening. People when people go away from what God is calling them to do, life gets harder.
Yeah.
And when you believe that Jesus is the way that you get that shalom, it starts there.
Yes.
And we're not saying we've got it all figured out.
No,
we're all
sure.
perfect. And I think we talked about that a lot last week. Like, hey, we're navigating Knoxville. We as a church are not because we're at the end of at the end saying, hey, come to us. No, we're saying, hey, we're going on this road with you.
Yes.
And we believe that Jesus offers peace and shalom and wholeness, and he offers these things. Now, come on this journey with us to find where that is in your life.
For sure. I mean, that was something that I hope people really get is like Westtown Christian Church is not the destination. Jesus is the destination. And because I think Jesus is constantly leading us, it is a journey, right? Jesus is not in my mind, Jesus does not stand at a point and say, all right, come to me. He says that, but he's still moving. Like he doesn't stop and say, all right, we've gone far enough. Jesus is constantly working and moving to bring shalom, bring the kingdom into the world and all creation through his church. And so as we're talking about this navigating on this journey, it's like, well, it's a journey because we're following him. And because he, I believe, is constantly moving and working in the world and calling each of us in our church, in our individual lives, in our families to go and do and make disciples. And while we're on that journey, I think he is restoring us to wholeness, but he is also calling us to partner with him and helping other people find it too, which I think is really exciting because that means that, following Jesus isn't just this like static thing that we stay at. It's like, no, this is a journey. This is an adventure. This is life to the full as we follow him wherever he goes.
Yeah. And I know in my personal life is like, I look back 10 years ago and I go, there are things that I believed at that point that I don't believe now. There are things that I did that I don't, and there are things that I didn't, and now I do believe.
Yeah.
And not saying there's not truth, not saying that there aren't those type of things, but there are, as you study and as you grow and as you mature, you see more and more things where it's like, oh, I want to be more like Jesus in this and things like that. So I think all of that's part of a journey, and I would say everybody, whether you are a believer or not, you're on a journey in this life.
Yeah.
Now, whether you're going towards Christ or just trying to go away from him, that's a decision that people are going to have to make.
Yeah.
And he's not going to force you.
Right.
But if you're saying, hey, I believe that he has shalom, he has wholeness, he offers that, then I'm going to work towards him.
Yeah.
And start the process.
Yeah, and we talked about that too Sunday with the whole like bounded set or center set idea. Like I don't think Jesus fences himself in. We compared it almost to shepherds and farmers who control like a small piece of land. Like they can just build fences around 3 acres and keep their animals in. But if you own 3,000 acres, that's pretty hard to fence in. And so especially in Australia, where the story came from, those farmers who own a lot of land just decided, well, instead of building fences, why don't we just put wells in different parts of the property? And then, the animals won't stray far from the wells because that's their source of life. I think life with Jesus functions a lot the same way. Like, he is the center. Like he is the well. He calls himself the living water. Like he is our source of life. And so the question is, well, are we moving toward him or not? Are we oriented toward Jesus? Are we navigating toward him, or are we oriented and navigating a different direction? And so that's really what we desire for people. We understand that, like, you're not going to get people from like point A in their journey with Jesus to point Z overnight.
Yeah.
But could you get someone to take a step from A to B, B to C? Like, can we continue to build these small steps on our, because that's all we've ever done. Like you talk about your life, I think about mine. It's the same thing. I don't ever feel like there has been this massive overnight shift in the way I live, but I do feel like over years, just hopefully taking smaller steps towards Jesus, he has brought more wholeness and has changed me.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we want for other people too, is like, can you just take one step?
Yeah.
Can you just turn and face in that direction and just start moving? Because eventually you're going to start to see what you're talking about, that life does get better with him. And you can begin to experience some of that wholeness.
Yeah, and I would even say we don't expect everybody to believe that wholeness comes from Jesus right away.
Yeah. Oh, no.
I think that's the A to B. Like, you start seeing it, you start going, oh, I want to, I see what they have in their lives. I see what Jesus offers, and it's better than what the world offers.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that first step towards Jesus is just saying, well, I'm willing to look.
Yeah.
I'm willing to find out.
Yeah.
And, or I have a friend they've got something special in their marriage or with their kids or with their walk with Jesus, or they seem like they have wholeness in these areas.
Yeah.
Maybe it's worth a look.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that's the A to B. It's not even like actually believing, but just a step towards believing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you're using the well analogy again, like an animal who's 100 yards away from the well versus an animal who's 1,000 yards away, well, that first step looks really different. The one that's 1,000 yards away is like, I think it's in this direction, but I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to walk a little ways to find out. I think the same with us. Like people, like if you're in closer proximity to Jesus, well, your A to B step is going to look a lot different from someone who is very far from Jesus in proximity or even in knowledge or awareness. So I love that idea. And I would go back and at least like look at the graphic from the sermon about the centered set model. I love that idea because it accounts and makes space for everybody, no matter where they're at right now, to take a turn toward him. And that's all we can expect from people. We desire people to get as close to him as possible, but we also know that depending on where we're starting in our journey, like it's going to look a little different for everybody.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. And there are, with it looking different, there are some people who are probably listening to this or have experienced God in this crazy way where it feels like I was so far off, Jesus came in.
Yeah.
Brought me in. Like I was so far from, I wasn't even, and boom, he hit me and changed my mindset, changed how I was living in an instant. You know, you said yours, it doesn't seem like it's mostly huge shifts, but for some people, that is the reality.
For sure.
And so everybody's different in their walk, and which is actually a beautiful thing, and it makes for incredible stories of how God has rescued people.
Yeah.
Testimonies to me is one of the most powerful parts of who Jesus is, and the Christian faith is testimonies of, man, look at the shalom I have in my life, and because I have Jesus.
Yeah.
So now this upcoming week, we're shifting from the main our mission statement, right? And we're shifting to what is it called?
Core values.
Our core values.
Yeah.
And so this is just another part of breaking down what Westtown is and who we are and why we think God has placed us here in 9300 Middlebrook Pike. Why has he put this church here? Why has he put Kaleb and David and staff here? Why has he put each person that comes on a Sunday morning or watches online or somebody listening to this? Why does he have them at this place right now? And this is just a little dig deeper into what our mission is and what we think God's telling us to do. Yeah,
for sure. Like I think if you could break it down, like mission is what somebody sees. Like they hear us saying like we are navigating knowledge toward wholeness in Jesus. They're going to hear that. Values is more what somebody feels. So when you become a part of our community or you start hanging around, like what are you feeling? And so for instance, like this week, the first value, which is really kind of the overarching value, is being kingdom postured. So what that means is for us is like, you know, we all take a posture in the world. Some of us take a posture of like anger and like ready to fight. Others take a posture of defensiveness and fear. Others take a posture of, I'm just going to be selfish and only care about myself. We all kind of, it's the way we present ourselves toward the world. We want to be kingdom postured. meaning that in everything we do, we're living out what Jesus said in Matthew 6, to put the kingdom first, to seek the kingdom and his righteousness first. And so that is the overarching value of the following three that we'll talk about in the weeks ahead. But just the idea of we are submitting to his kingdom, we are putting it first, and the way we act, think, treat other people, our motivations all fall under the umbrella of, does this further God's kingdom, or is this furthering my kingdom? And that's kind of the lens that which we'll start to look at that this week.
Yeah, that's great. I think of like ambassadors, somebody coming from a country. You want them to represent who your country is. I like the 300.
Yes.
You have that scene where that ambassador comes and he's talking. He's like talking up the king and stuff, and it's like you can tell he represents somebody that he knows has power and has strength and stuff. That the representative doesn't have that much,
right?
But he comes representing the person that does, and he comes with that kingdom posture.
Yeah.
And then you can also see the kingdom posture in the
Spartans.
Yeah, and the Spartans, where it's like, hey, we know who we are, and we know who we represent, and all of us represent that.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's a like kingdom posture. I think of us being ambassadors. Paul tells us that we're ambassadors for Christ. We're supposed to go out and tell and live a life like his.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's a great way to put it. I think ambassador is really one of the perfect phrases and perfect ways to look at this through. And yeah, I mean, as an ambassador, you are representing your home country in a foreign land. It's kind of what we do.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus says his kingdom is not from this world, not of this world. Well, we live in this world. And when we're talking about the world, I don't even necessarily mean like the physical matter of the world, but when the world, that phrase is used in Scripture, it's often referring to like the ways in which the world works, kind of the sinful order of things in the world. And so we do serve a king whose kingdom is not of this world, is not of the way we've ordered and structured and rebelled against God in the world, but is actually something outside of it. And so we do have to live, as Peter says, as aliens and exiles in the world, right? We are foreigners in the world representing a different kingdom. And so you're exactly right. How we put forth that kingdom's values really matters.
Yeah, that's going to be a really great one to dig into. I'm looking forward to that. I don't want to dig in too much to it this week, because next week we'll be right back here. Yeah, and we'll be able to
the funny thing is Ron is preaching it. So
okay.
So I'm trying to get my stuff out now before.
Okay. That sounds good. Yeah. No, you got to save some content.
That's
for
true. That's
podcast
true.
Next week.
Yeah.
So, but you did great on Sunday.
Yeah, thanks.
And I'm really excited about the direction West Town's going.
Me too. I am too. I think God's really moving us in a cool spot. Yeah. So I guess we'll talk more next week, and we'll hit Kingdom Postured and look ahead to the rest of this Plant the Flag series. So thanks for listening to the Table Talk podcast, and we will see you next week.